Hi, I'm Louise Weaver. I'm a Melbourne-based visual artist that works predominantly with painting and sculpture to make individual works and also expansive installations. Today I'm going to refer to several abstract paintings in the NGV Collection and demonstrate various strategies for mark making with paint and talk about some ideas relating to chance, gesture and surface. The paintings I have selected are Mark Rothko's 1956 painting Untitled Red, Helen Frankenthaler's 1964 work Cape, Provincetown, Pierre Soulage's painting 6 November 1967, Lee Krasner's Combat 1965, and Eva Hesse's painting titled No Title from 1963. These artists often base their paintings on an experience of being in the natural world, real or imagined, as I do with many of my own works. In addition, these artists also discovered content for their work through the process of experimenting with materials. Subject matter, such as the landscape, may be a point of departure for what is primarily an exploration with paint: surface, texture, pattern, repetition, or colour. Let's get started. I'm going to begin by preparing a couple of coloured grounds. The first version, with a single colour, such as Mark Rothko might have used to begin his painting Untitled Red from 1956. Notice along the edges of his painting there is a pale pink colour that appears to frame the work. This colour is probably the first layer that Rothko painted on the surface of the canvas. Let's make a pink coloured ground across the surface of this piece of paper. You can use cartridge paper from a sketchbook or office paper while you practice. I like to use heavier weight artist quality watercolour paper as it doesn't wrinkle as much when it's wet. I use a wide brush to mix the acrylic paint with a little water on a palette, in this case an old plate, before applying it with even sweeps across the paper, back and forth to coat the whole surface. The ground in Rothko's painting doesn't have an even application of colour, although it might seem to when you first look at the painting as a whole. There are hints of orange at the bottom edge and along the top of the right of the canvas. The subtle addition of orange makes the painting seem to pulse with energy. It makes the red seem warmer and the pink wash appear cooler and to recede in the picture plane. These features help to create a dynamic abstract composition. I often like to make several versions of an artwork at the same time, varying the amount of paint, perhaps adding a slightly different colour, like some orange, into the mix. This creates a gradient of colour. Looking back at the Rothko painting, we can see that over the pale pink wash he has added several other layers of colour, slightly more opaque layers that don't quite reach the edge of the canvas. In some areas he may have wiped some of the paint off the brush to create scumbling marks, seen here through the central passage of the painting. You can tell that he worked on the painting by turning it around in different directions, as there are drips at the top of the canvas instead of at the bottom, where you might imagine they would usually be. To me, these accidental marks seem almost like a fringe. They reveal that during the process of making, Rothko was open to chance and incorporated spontaneous events or even accidents into the work. I find these details make the painting feel very intimate and idiosyncratic. While the paint is still damp on my painting, I can add some opaque pink in the central area and add different tones of an orangey red at the bottom of the paper and more vibrant red at the top. The key is not to worry about blending the edges. Leave the drips or mistakes. If the surface becomes too wet, I like to blot the paper with another sheet or sometimes several sheets to make lots of surfaces for further works at the same time. Pressing with more or less pressure in this way may create interesting textures and marks. Sometimes it feels as though the paint has a life of its own. I might keep these spontaneous works as they are, or experiment further with more layers. In Helen Frankenthaler's large painting Cape, Provincetown, we see areas of paint applied in big gestural sweeps. The quality of the paint, especially in the central blue area, with its stains and feathery edges, reinforces the sensation of a watery expanse. Helen Frankenthaler said of her attitude to making works of art, "There are no rules. That is how art is born, how breakthroughs happen. Go against the rules or ignore the rules. That is what invention is about." If I dampen the paper with water slightly, I can drop liquid paint onto the surface and create pools of colour with feathered edges, like the central motif in Frankenthaler's painting. I can also use some kitchen paper scrunched up, dipped into the paint on the palette and pressed into the surface. I might open up the paper and press it onto another sheet of paper with a previously painted coloured ground. This creates unexpected patterns and marks that I can layer further with stains of paint. I might notice a characteristic in the composition I would like to emphasize and highlight it by painting up to the edge of the form or editing out areas with paint when it becomes dry. Taking this idea of experimenting with different types of mark making further, if we look at the Pierre Soulages work, painting 6 November 1967, we can deduce that he first applied a sweep of inky blue-black with a very wide brush. When you look at the surface closely, you can see the marks the hair from the paintbrush has left across the smooth linen support. The paint is semi-transparent and almost feels like a waterfall. Along the top third of the painting, he used much thicker paint to create a textured area that appears almost sculptural in form. The slightly raised surfaces capture and reflects light, changing the viewer's perception and appearance of the dark inky colour. If I dip the edge of a piece of cardboard into ink and drag it across the surface of my paper, I can create a great variety of marks and textures. Lines that resemble calligraphy or the bristles of a wide paintbrush. I can move the cardboard in different directions to create both broad strokes and fine crisp lines in one continuous action. With experimentation and practice, I can develop more control and can begin to anticipate the potential effects various types of cardboard might make. I can cut the edge to make serrations to create an open series of parallel lines. You might like to try the width and number of cuts you make in the cardboard to vary the quality of line you make. Here you can see the cardboard has splayed and created various linear marks parallel to one another. Let's look at Lee Krasner's Combat 1965. Reading about Lee Krasner's processes, I discovered that she liked to cut up paintings and reconfigure them in a variety of compositions. There is a feeling of juxtaposing collage-like elements in this painting. Shapes and forms that are unified through repetition of mark and pattern, the treatment of colour, predominantly orange and pink, and scale. While I have been preparing some of my experimental paintings on paper, I have felt really excited about the appearance of some, and have realised that others might need further consideration. One way of reinterpreting less successful works is to reuse them in sections as collage material. Many compositional arrangements can be trialled using collage techniques. I can lay some of the cut-out collage elements I have prepared onto larger sheets of paper and experiment with a variety of arrangements. I can play with pattern, repetition, scale and colour just as Lee Krasner has in her painting Combat. Patterns that occur almost by accident by cutting circles in half. These can be reused and form a dynamic underlying structure for the composition. I might take images with my phone camera and keep arranging the collage pieces until I am satisfied with the composition. Eva Hesse is well known for her sculptures and installations. However, she also made wonderful paintings. This painting from 1963 has two main parts, a swirling tangle of monochromatic gestural marks, anchored by the brightly coloured, hard-edged geometric form at the top third of the composition. Positioning these bright coloured stripes and a triangle in this way creates a focal point in the composition. In a similar way, I might discover that a painting I have made may suddenly come alive with the addition of a small accent. It's best not to have a fixed idea about the way the work should look. Be playful and experiment, and most of all, have fun.